To me, it's like giving women their minds back. They feel like they're losing their mind almost.
Welcome to the Audacious Life Podcast, where your host, Stephanie Roberts, welcomes you to listen to women from all walks of life share their stories of finding freedom from abuse. You'll hear experts give you real advice on what you need to do to create hope for your future. Make a plan and see that light at the end of the tunnel. You'll learn how to build yourself up spiritually, mentally, physically, financially, and legally. 1 in 4 women have experienced some form of abuse, and 80% of women who leave abusive relationships go back. It's time to change that statistic and give you the audacious life you've always wanted. A life of freedom, peace, and true joy. Put on your headphones and get ready to be inspired.
Hello, and welcome to the Audacious Life Podcast. I'm your host, Stephanie Roberts, and today we are fortunate to have, for our very first official interview, Patricia Evans, none other than Patricia Evans, the leading authority on verbal and emotional abuse, author of multiple books, and she is an incredible person and such a fun interview. I think you're going to enjoy this a lot. So much insight. I can't say enough about her. She has influenced my life tremendously, and many of the women that I've been fortunate to meet through the forums and support groups that I've been involved with, she has been an integral part of their lives, either through her videos, her books, her forum, phone calls, you name it. She's just been such a tremendous support and such a great perspective for all of us. So, without further ado, here she is, Patricia Evans.
Great. Very happy to be here and be able to chat with you about this enormous issue of people being in verbally abusive relationships. You know, that's the problem.
Yeah, it's amazing how prevalent it really is.
Well, I introduced the term verbally abusive relationship to humanity in 1992. Before that, if somebody's husband didn't speak to them, they'd say, well, he's taciturn. If he got an explosive rage at them, they'd say, well, you know he's got a quick temper, so don't provoke him, and so on. So women had no way to figure out what was happening in their relationship, no way to figure out what was wrong with the person who was doing this, and just lived in this kind of state of confusion because they didn't know what was going on. So I wrote the first book actually because I was in grad school in psychology and thinking, well, I'll become a therapist because I can help people. I'd heard people put down, but nobody had ever put me down. My mother and father had never said a negative you statement to me, like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about, or you're never going to amount to anything, or you know, all these kind of comments kids hear, you to be seen and not heard. So this professor, so I looked around, I didn't see anything that addressed the issues of helping people who had been in these situations, and I knew cousins who had, and I thought, wow, there's much here. And I talked to a professor, and he said, there's nothing out there. He said, nobody even knows what it's all about. And he said, I heard stuff like that. We were calling it put downs and stuff. He said, it's really verbal abuse, and I was told to be seen and not heard, and it's affected me all my life. And then he said, why don't you write a book that would show people how to recognize it? That would be something. And so I'll never forget those words. And it was Dr. Carl Putz. He passed away in 2010, but we're way back around 1990, and he suggested that. So it felt like a perfect thing to do. I thought, my gosh, this child is told, these things, is not even knowing what's happening to him, and people don't know, and maybe it'll help somebody. Like, that's what I thought. I thought, might help somebody. So I just wrote the book, and right away I was on Oprah and CNN, and Newsweek called it groundbreaking, and there was no literature anywhere. So over the years, I've got more and more contacts from people, and just started doing consulting, and I developed the other books, like the books to show, ways to develop yourself, and the second book, the survivor's book, and how to see that when someone defines you, they can't see you, hear you. They're telling you you're a person who wants to argue, which is the last thing on earth that the partner wants to do. So they would start calling me saying, I know something was wrong in my marriage, but I didn't know what. And they read my first book, The Verbally Abusive Relationship, and they read often the second, and they understood that it was sort of ending the relationship when the person ended the communication by saying, just like, be quiet, and you don't know what you're talking about, and you're trying to start a fight. So then I developed the third book, which I think is also extremely important. It's called Controlling People. I actually named it on my manuscript, Breaking the Spell. Publishers named it Controlling People, which is fine. And so I thought, I was motivated. I thought, why would somebody say I love you and then say something unkind? Why would they do this, especially when the other person's trying to be nicer and nicer and nicer and sweeter and sweeter and sweeter?
Exactly.
So nobody will yell at them, so nobody will put them down and won't be mad at them. And so Controlling People to me is a very exciting book, because I figured it out as I went, and I wrote, and I asked myself, well, how could they do this? How could they do that? And as I went along, I realized, that really when they say I love you, they're often loving their idea of you or their projection of what you are and who you are. And when you don't match that projection, that's when they get very, very angry. And every single case I've had shows that up as a real factor. So then psychologists and doctors and so forth were sending me notes about this should be disseminated throughout the world, and this should be in psychiatric residencies before we do more harm. So then that's how that came about. And then I thought, well, there are a lot of women who think, okay, if I can just get him to realize what he's doing, and 98 to 99% of the people who contact me are women, because they're experiencing this so frequently. After all, they're kind of used to being defined. They were defined as unable to vote and unable to go to college and so many things through centuries, and unable to have different positions. And so over time, they kind of wanted to see, well, if I could wake them up. So then I developed the Can He Change book. It's The Verbally Abusive Man, Can He Change? And that has a list of about 400 samples of abusive sentences, so she can approach him with a witness in the room. Now, I want to say something that's really unique to these relationships. He can't really hear you unless you're saying, I adore you or something. He can't really hear you unless there's someone else in the room. And you know how it's an automatic screen in his brain, I think, anyway, or his mind. It actually is like, what's Mary hearing my wife say? What's Joe hearing my wife say?
Wow.
Then he hears something. And I even checked all around. I went in the court records of the OJ case, and sure enough, somebody, let's say Mary, was standing there, put it in the record, and she said OJ walked up to this woman, Nicole, who was divorced from him, who was terrified of him, who'd been battered physically by him, who had no relationship to him. And OJ said, I'll join you and the family for dinner after the recital. Like he was talking to his projection, this amorphous, ever-changing, all-need-meeting extension of himself, really. That's what a projection is. And so he walks up and he says this, and she said no. And he heard her because Mary was standing there. What did Mary just hear my wife say? She said, no, I can't join her for dinner. So he felt so ejected out of her being, because this projection, this part of him was gone. He felt like he was being killed. He felt like he was being attacked. And so he went ahead and I believe, was the one that killed her. Yeah. Wow. So it's a phenomena that occurs, and there are there are men who can change, but they really need an extensive program. Now, let's see. I think probably a lot of your listeners are going, sometimes he gets mad at me. I wonder, am I in a verbally abusive relationship? I don't know. I'm wondering. Yeah.
What are the signs?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, wow. Okay. Well, first of all, it doesn't happen when anybody else is around. Almost always, unless it's like a close buddy of his or something. It just, there's nobody hears it. Everybody. Another thing about it is that these nasty comments, these mean, these rages, these yelling, these put downs, they're going on to the person who's the target, usually the partner, but other people will say, he's such a wonderful guy, you're so lucky, he can be very charming, and, really, very charming. But, a lot of times it isn't just yelling and raging at her, it's defining her. And I would say 90% of the women who contact me have found one of my books, usually the first one, which is great, and they just universally say, I knew something was wrong, I just didn't know what. That's it. Because they know, it's just, they can't understand it. And then they'll try to explain something like, I didn't put that there so you trip on it. My hands were full, or I wasn't trying to start a fight. I just wanted, dinner got cold because I didn't know you were going to be late, and I thought you were going to call me. And he'll say, I don't need to be attacked like that. You don't appreciate anything I do. So he tells her what she's doing, attacking him, which she's not. We know she's just asking him to understand that it would be important to let her know if he was going to be really late. But you see, his amorphous, ever-changing projection, this dream woman thing, that's not in his dreams, but it's coming out of his unconscious, this part of him actually, would never say this to him. She would never complain or point out something he did and so he doesn't show any empathy to his partner. He doesn't say, oh my gosh, you must have been really worried, when I didn't come, or I'm so sorry dinner got all cold. I'll heat it up, and, I promise you I'll always let you know if I'm going to be really late. That kind of thing. Yeah, so he doesn't. So it's like, well, what other kind of things, no one's around, we know that. Other people see the verbal abuser, the person who most commonly indulges in verbal abuse in the relationship, for short, call him the verbal abuser. Not to call them names, but to make it short for saying the person who indulges in verbal abuse in the relationship. Okay, so anyway, so the verbal abuser is seen as nice and not controlling, and the verbal abuse that he expresses is generally totally unexpected. Yeah. Often, it's always pretty unexpected, but even a really loud and angry yelling thing can be totally unexpected. Shocked. She's like, wait a minute, what's he yelling about, And then it often occurs when she's happy or enthusiastic. She might say, oh, I found this great yoga class and it's free. The city's putting it on. And he'll say, you don't need to take yoga. You got to, if you spent more time cleaning the house would be better, or something, down what she wants to do. So, yeah, so there's another thing, these little things that she's hearing all the time are big things, really. Right. They define her. They seem kind of familiar, but there always seem to be like something new, but not, So he may tell her what she is, what she thinks, what she feels, what she wants, what she's doing, what she's trying to do, what she should do, what she needs, and so forth. And, only the person, let's say you, I'll say you, only you know what you are and think and feel and want. Nobody can tell you those things. So this shows us, wow, there must be a projection, because this guy, and I'm still saying guy because it can happen to men, they could be with a woman who does this. It's just such a small percentage, and they're so extremely, basically mentally ill that I don't hear a lot from them. But guy, you know, he doesn't feel like he's crazy when he tells her what she wants, like you want to argue. He just doesn't. He doesn't feel crazy when he tells her what she's trying to do, like you're trying to start a fight or that you want to win. You know, the last thing she's ever thought about is winning. It's truly about the last thing I've ever thought about. Yeah, he just doesn't feel crazy. So the other interesting thing about it is it's like every time this thing happens and she's kind of sick inside, she's kind of sad, and maybe later she doesn't even remember what happened. She just remembers he said something and I felt really bad. Now I can't remember what he said. And sometimes she does remember, but after a while she starts to dissociate from it. I know he said something, but no matter what, when she thinks, wow, our relationship's in trouble, he acts like nothing happened.
Right.
That's the most common thing, just absolutely nothing happened. Okay, then there can be other things that can go on in this kind of a relationship. He may not only be verbally abusive, but use verbal abuse to kind of control her. Well, I can't really show you what I did on taxes. You wouldn't understand. Or, you know, she may feel kind of isolated in some way. Well, you don't need to, you know, call them up and spend time talking to that gal. She's kind of crazy. I don't like her. You know, we don't have to have those people over. Or why don't we move here? And it doesn't matter if your parents live 1,000 miles away. You can still talk to them on the phone once in a little while. And so in some ways, she's isolated.
Right.
And then another interesting thing is if someone said, oh, it looks like you guys have a great marriage, he will define the marriage. He'll say, yeah, we have a terrific marriage. Nobody asked her. He'll define it for both of them. He doesn't say, I think it's good. Now, Mary, what do you think? You know, do you think it's good? And all that. So then beyond all this and underlying everything, she's blamed for everything. She's totally blamed for everything. Even little angry little comments and rude things and sarcasm, there's all a tinge of anger in them, and it's like pushing her away and stabbing her in the heart because she loves him, and then all of a sudden he goes, oh, look at that mess. Man, are you sloppy? You know, so he's telling her she's sloppy. And she knows she's really pretty meticulous, but she was just cooking or something. So here's, you know, so she's wounded. He's angry at her. He's irritated at her, and she just doesn't know what to make of it. So it's really just so insidious. It's so insidious. And so over time, you know, she's trying to resolve things. She's trying to walk on eggshells, so to speak. She's trying to not upset him. She's trying to smooth it over. And, of course, very often she doesn't tell any of her friends or neighbors or family about what's going on because she feels like, well, I must be doing something. He's nice to all the other people. Right. And she doesn't know about the projection. And so she has no idea exactly why this is going on. And so she'll start to be suffering from stress-related illnesses. It's very, very common. She may feel exhausted, just keeping the energy up to be positive and to keep going and to do everything, and constantly feel assaulted. It's horrible. So she'll just start to become exhausted. And then, you know what, chronic fatigue in one medical model says that chronic fatigue can come from the muscles just holding more and more and more tension. And pretty soon they're just everything, all the fibers and everything are just aching. And imagine like lifting a weight 100 times. Pretty soon that muscle in your arm, say if you're just sitting there lifting a little weight, pretty soon it's just burning, you know. Right. Well, all her body's doing that because she can't relax. She's in such tension over these little jolts and jolts and jolts. And she can't seem to have a conversation with this person she's married to. And she knows something's wrong. And everyone tells her it's great. And so she begins to lose her spontaneity. It's just horrible, horrible. And her enthusiasm. And then she's on guard all the time. And begins to doubt if she says anything, whether she should speak up or not. Because all these things, a lot of this silences her, If she's told, you don't know what you're talking about, you're blowing it out of proportion. You're too sensitive. You're just trying to start a fight. You want to argue. Then she's trying to explain, I don't want to argue. I don't want to argue. I wasn't trying to argue. And then pretty soon she loses her self-confidence, and she's immersed in this situation, and it's like she's losing her mind. She gets very depressed, and odd different illnesses can arise too. I mean, just different kinds of things where the body's vulnerable, stomach, bowel problems, and all that. She's just not well. She's not well, tired, she's exhausted, she's in pain, and she doesn't have a clue what's wrong. She feels some anxiety. You probably please do.
Yeah, but the anxiety related to all the illness stuff and holding on to you mentioned the inability to relax. I think many of us who've been through this, you never sleep because you literally are in that anxiety non-sleep cycle. So you can't sleep because you can't relax. And then you're so exhausted that you have more anxiety and your heart's palpitating and you're just literally on edge. And it's a little bit, it's like that sleeping with the enemy concept. You're sitting there next to this person who doesn't know you, truly know you. They just know that projection, even though you may not know that that's what's going on, but it feels that way. And you just feel like you're just this stranger. And I wonder how many women mention to survive, do they just completely create a separate life internally and kind of externally?
Yeah, they do try to find ways to cope. Yeah, they do try to find ways to cope and try to identify it. And then if they talk to me, I will give them a little program that a little thing they can try. And there are people who do this who just think they're great. They think they're great. They've developed a beautiful persona to the world, and they think they're the nicest guy in the world, and that kind of thing. And so they get this partner who goes to the appendix of my 4th book and makes a list of all the things she's heard, and she brings some people in, and she confronts them, and to the effect of, I give her a whole paragraph and what to write and what to say and so. But basically, she's saying, hey, if this relationship's going to work, don't tell me what I am and think and feel and me and what I am and what I'm doing and so on, because you're not me, and you're not God. You don't know any of these things. See, they're all basically they're lies that are told to you about you.
Right.
And so, and to know that, hey, this is not, you're not anything he says. When he says you are and a negative, that's a lie. It's not true. So anyway, so this, so there's, we have this huge impact on the partner, and she can become ill, physically really ill, and she may feel that she just wants to escape, or that she's like something's wrong with her. She's born in the wrong time and place. She just doesn't fit in like other people, and all these things occur. Now, some of these controllers, and I was kind of surprised as I was doing this work over, 20-some years, that they are, some will become extremely controlling of money. Even the money she earns all goes into an account, and then he won't let her in. Really bad.
That's very common. I just had an interview earlier today about that very subject, and I was actually going to ask you about that. I think some women can't even afford your books, Patricia. I mean, they're going to find out who you are for free, and then
and go to libraries. Some women are in these relationships, and they have tons of money, and some have no money. If your money's controlled, then you can go to a library, and one can ask for an all-library search if they don't carry the book. Now, the other day, amazingly enough, this woman said, I went to the library, and they had all 4 of your books. I saw them at your library. I went back this morning so I could get them into the house secretly, and they were all taken. They come and they go really fast.
That's telling, isn't it?
Yeah, I think there's way over 1 million readers, and close to 1 million sold on the first book, and a lot, 13 or 14 languages that is the first one at least has been published in. So it's getting to be known that it's not okay to tell a person what they are and think and feel and want and need and know and are doing and should do and all that. It's just plain crazy. People don't like that word because we should be saying mentally ill, but there is a way that we use the word like he drove me crazy or I'm crazy in love. You know, words used a lot not to mean to denigrate a person who's mentally ill, but just as a general kind of nonsensical word. You know, he's nonsensical. You know, or he's irrational. You could say that, but in any case. It is behavior that is irrational, and when the person who's indulging in this kind of abuse they don't see it as abuse, of course. They feel fine just saying, see, they're responding to the fact that real women showed up in the body they were projected into. Now, controlling people explains that, but they do feel attacked, and they will form a confabulation. They will form this instant confabulation. It's something the mind does. Like if you had amnesia, this is where you learn about it in diagnostic manuals for psychologists. And it's if someone has amnesia and they're suddenly in the store, their mind will form a confabulation. Oh, I came to get milk. So they don't panic because they don't have any memory of why they came or that they were even coming over to the store. And so they just had some amnesia from this blow on the head or some illness or whatever. So the mind will form a confabulation. So when suddenly let's say the perpetrator has this horrible feeling of being attacked, he doesn't know it's because his projection is disappeared and real woman showed up. He doesn't know. He has no knowledge of this projection because it's unconscious. Right. So he just feels attacked. So his mind forms a confabulation. And you know what's really sort of, I don't know, a difficult thing to consider, but it's true. These confabulations are recorded like memory. So he says, you were yelling at me, or it was the tone of your voice, or you're trying to attack me, or whatever. You know, you're making me the bad guy, or whatever. And she's just saying, gee, you know, I'd really like it if you'd let me know if you're going to be that late because the dinner got cold. You know, or I didn't know if I should go ahead and eat and put yours in the microwave. I mean, she's just trying to be normal, and it doesn't work because you know, it doesn't work. And gee, God forbid she asks him a question like, "Hey, honey, did you see if the mail came when you came in today?" Right. What am I supposed to do? Keep track of your mail? Did I scare you, Stephanie? I was like, oh my gosh.
Right. No, and I used to say the whole making up of stories and kind of rewriting what just happened and remembering it as memory. Oh. You know what? If there was a video camera right here, I could play this back to you and show it to anybody, and they would see that it was perfectly reasonable. And I would actually wish, like, where's candid camera?
Oh, yes. Yeah, where's candid camera? Well, here's something. If you're in a really, really difficult relationship and this person's in 100,000% denial about what they're doing and all, why not get a small video camera? I think there's one called the Elf that might be small. It has a case you can buy that you hang it like a pendant, you know, and you put a big safety pin up through your shirt and everything and back down, so across the court. So it won't swing around, but it's got flexibility. And when that person walks in the room, you turn it on. And they can talk nice or they can not talk at all. And sometimes that's a great relief. But actually, you know, why not? Why not? If you're at the point where you're going out of your mind, you're depressed, you're feeling maybe suicidal, a lot of women do, get that depressed, and they just feel like they're going crazy, they could carry this, just wear it, or you could look for other types of cameras. But in any case, to have it on video, and he knows it's on, it's not like he's, you know, getting, you know, blindsided or whatever football term they use. Yeah. It's blindsiding.
Right.
And so, it's just on, and she could say, you know, yeah, it's on. It's my video camera, and I want to make sure I remember what you tell me, sweetheart. He might say, I'm not speaking, and she says, oh, great. For finally, the tables are turned. He's not telling her to shut up.
Wow.
It's like,
you've had people do that, and how does that usually work out for
Well,
people?
they get a record, or, and some are reluctant. They don't always tell me everything about what it is. Because what I do a consult, I tell everybody what to do, and then sometimes they'll call me a year later and tell me how they're doing or whatever, but it's not like an every week meeting for a lot of people, though a few people do talk to me when they need a lot of support over some time, so that'll happen. An interesting thing also is that there was an audio that went viral that was Mr. Sterling. He owned a basketball team, and then he ranted about how he shouldn't want his companion, this beautiful young lady, to bring anybody who was African American to the game. Only he put it in different terms. And this went viral. It was a basketball team, and he owned it, and he had to sell it. He couldn't go to any single game or practice that they did. The whole country came down on him, so to speak, and rightly so. And so he had made this big rant, and it was on video, on tape, and evidently they had the tape on for some reason or other, so the whole thing ended up on this tape and an audio recording. Anybody could just put in, Sterling rant, and they would find it on the internet. And it says, so here's reason I'm bringing it up is because everyone was concerned about all these things he said to her about not bringing this person and all that. And she says, I'm sorry, have some juice, you'll feel better, or whatever. But in this rant that he did, in this rant, there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, about 10 that I found, and I only listened to it like 2 times so I could catch these, 10 ways that he psychologically raped her, defined her inner world, or told her what she was, you are, you want, you have, how she feels, you, and what she does. You're a fighter, you're a born fighter, you're a mental case, you want to fight, all you ever want to do is fight, you have the worst mouth. All this time she just only said, why can't I didn't even bring him, why can't I just have a picture of me with Magic Johnson or some famous person, Yeah, you love to fight, you fight with everybody, that's all you do. He verbally abused her, but I can understand why nobody really commented on that, because the real point of this whole airing of it was that he was basically ranting in a racist way, and it was so terrible to all his team members and everything. It was just so abusive, really, really bad. But he really did all these things, and so I think that that as our world becomes a little more conscious all the time, then I think that we can sort of begin to notice and say, and we can start teaching, of course, our children. You don't know what somebody is. There's no reason calling them names. It's not okay and stuff. There's a few things I have in the 4th book where I talk about, I have that list of all these people, all these things they say, I'll read a couple to you because it's very interesting. So if one can kind of say, okay, maybe he's got this illusory projection into me, something like that. So it's like, and I call it the projection a dream woman, but I really want to say it's not, and I did explain it earlier in the book, it's not in his dreams or thoughts. It is reality to him. In fact, when I mentioned this gentleman called me up, he called me up and he said, oh, now I know why I threw my wife to the ground. So I suspect he hadn't really been physical before, but man, he flipped out, he threw her to the ground. Oh my gosh, what happened? He said, well, it was like this. I got home from work early and I love to cook. So I was cooking up a storm. I had all the burners going, and then my wife came in from work, and she said hi, and I said hi, and then she looked down at the mail, and I went in a rage and threw it to the floor. And now I know why I just read controlling people. Because the rest of me, my projection, whatever he said there, was going to walk over and say, can I help you with the cooking?
Oh,
now, what happened inside of him, see, they lose their warm, receptive, nurturing, emotionally intelligent, intuitive self. So about 50% of their psyche is projected over there. So when she showed up as a real person looking down at the male, all of a sudden, instantly, half of him was gone. He was ejected from her. She filled the body where he had resided. She was looking down at the male, and half of him was tossed into outer space. And guys have told me it's like being ejected into outer space, connected to nothing. Just adrift where you can't live for a second. Why in his feeling self, it was like she killed him.
Wow.
It was just like he was infinitely rejected and tossed into outer space. So all he did then was throw to the floor. So in that moment, it didn't seem like this horrible thing.
Right.
But of course, later he realized what happened, and he called me up to say, that he did. So it's a very interesting and insidious kind of thing. It's just something that has affected people for generations, and we have to be able to allow our children to grow up having all of their functions. We only have 4: thinking, feeling, sensate, and intuitive. So if they don't have a feeling function anymore, because of what I heard last week, I had talked to a lot of women, and one woman said, you know what my husband just did? I said, what? He just told my son this. He said, you're 4 years old now. You don't need to cry anymore.
Wow.
So he was taking away his emotional function so he could turn his son into a psychological paraplegic, because they were always also trying to take away their sensate function by saying, you're not hurt. You got nothing to cry about. So they'd take away these functions. So we have these people who are missing half of themselves, so to speak, and that part of them is projected into their partner, and she's literally their other half in their mind, in their psyche. She's the rest of them.
And why is that missing?
Well, usually, that originates. That's a really great question. The disconnect from the warm, receptive, nurturing, emotionally intelligent self is usually, in most cases, but not all, handed down from father to son. And in the very beginning of, say, tribal days, when one tribe would take something from another, the people in the tribe that had lost their things would send their young men out, despite the cold, despite their fear, despite their missing home, despite their intuition they might die. They went out. And then over millennia, fathers more and more began from the very beginning to disconnect their sons from their emotions. You've got nothing to cry about, and you have no feelings. You don't look within. You look outward at the enemy. And if you don't look within, you won't miss home, and you won't be afraid. So we'll take away all those awful things, so you will be able to go out there without feeling that fear. And, oh, by the way, we're going to toughen you up. We're going to take away some of your sensate experience. You're not even going to notice the cold. In fact, we'll carry this through for millions of years, and we'll even practice it in college hazings, where we'll hit you and you don't cry. So we'll practice this. So we will turn you we'll take away some of your sensate awareness. And hey, you know what? Intuition's a girl thing. So I don't want to hear you say that word again. So you don't look at it inside yourself and expect to get an answer. Besides, we've got dictators and rulers and all this to tell you what to do.
Wow.
So,
scary.
Yeah, and especially the general, He'll tell you what to do, and you can go out there despite the cold, despite the fear, despite intuiting your death. So it began to be, over millennia, that men began to identify being a man with being without these functions. In other words, I'm a real man if I'm a psychological paraplegic.
Wow.
And so that's what they started to do. And then where did the rest of them go? they projected it all into their partner or into women in general. It's a very important, as one psychologist said, this should be disseminated to groups and individuals throughout the world. Nothing else seems to be working very well. And he had taught psychology his whole life, Dr. David Quinby. Yeah, and he said he'd read hundreds and hundreds of attempts to figure out what's wrong. If we look at the world, we look around and we see, wonderful homes and families and parks and people having fun and camping trips and lots of really good stuff. Wonderful folks out there, people going to church or meditating on the mountain, whatever they do. It's all great. But then we see this other side where people are destroying people, where terrorists are running rampant, because they're so disconnected.
Right.
And then these people join them because being a psychological paraplegic, you're going to be pretty darn angry, just angry at everything, angry. And so what do you get to do? You can go join that group and you'll be accepted and you'll be treated with warmth and you will have buddies. And guess what? You get to blow things up to express your anger. So they're enlisting people for, this is one of the reasons why they're doing it. Another is that young people are idealistic and want, to have a good cause. But that gets us off the subject. So this verbal abuse is just a horrible, horrible thing. And so just to show you, or to illustrate a little bit for all you wonderful listeners out there, that this dream woman is really, we'll call it lost self, okay? And this lost self, people are thinking, wow, what's wrong with him? Why doesn't he they say he doesn't ask with a please when he wants something. I almost have to guess. And I answer in the book, of course, he will not ask directly with a please for something he would like. His projection, his lost self, already knows what he wants. They've been together since he was a baby. Oh, wow.
That's huge. That explains a lot. Wow.
Explains it all. Actually, there's just a few sentences. Actually, yeah. So then it's like, oh, but wait a minute. He argues against everything I say, all my opinions, views, and preferences. Or he counters your very thoughts. His projection and he are of the same mind. His. Can't have a separate thought. Yeah. So, yeah. Here's one more, because I don't own the copyright on this book. My publisher does. Anyway, it says this is in the fourth book, and they're all listed at verbalabuse.com. Okay. She says, he doesn't ask me about me. It's as if he has no interest in me.
Right.
Of course, he seldom, if ever, will ask you about you, how you feel, what you like about a restaurant or movie, what your favorite flower is. Doing so would conjure up real woman in the body where he anchored his projection.
Wow.
She'd be displaced. He would feel like he had lost part of himself. See, his resistance to asking, well, how are you feeling? Or how did that class go? Or did you like the yoga? Or, what's your favorite? I was going to get you a book for Valentine's, but do you like mysteries or do you like, biographies? What do you like? He doesn't ever really ask her anything like that. He might ask because he's dying to go skiing. His buddy's busy and out of town. So he might ask her, do you want to go skiing or do you like skiing, if he's never asked her before, or they're in a new relationship. He might ask her to find out if she can do something with him. See? Yeah, so that's that.
It's interesting because I remember this very distinctly with gift giving. Always getting something very different than was my personality, more in line with it, and my pretty distinct taste. And then finally just stating what I wanted. But I kept getting clothes from, various women's stores. And they were never my size. They were never my style. I always returned them. I always had a credit. I ended up using the credit for a gift for somebody else usually. Put it in it didn't have to be an expensive one.
Yeah. No, that's not his vision. Yeah. His projection was wearing something cute in a restaurant, so he'd have a charm on his arm. That's what he wanted, a charm on his arm, I think. I mean, it seems to me. Yeah, and so if that's so, then there's...
Great, but nope.
Yeah, it's just, because that, you wouldn't match his projection, who's just moves around like a charm on his arm. That's it. That's it.
I love that phrase. But wow, that is...
Yeah, yeah. So these guys, and the thing is, this, just like they always say, battered women could be anybody. It could be all socioeconomic realms and stuff. Well, definitely in verbally abusive relationships, the women could be anywhere from high up in government to psychiatrists to psychologists to marriage and family therapists to doctors and lawyers and CEOs and somebody with 500 to 600 employees and all of that I've done consultations with, or head of domestic violence programs. Because the thing is, and I guess this is really important, I don't want to forget to talk about it a little bit, is what I call the switch. The switch. They switch from, one thing to another. So basically, when he first meets you and you start going out on a date or two, he sees you through the vision of everything he ever wanted, the rest of himself. So he sees you as warm, receptive, nurturing, emotional, intuitive, lovely, soft, caring being, okay? He sees you through the lens of his lost self. So no matter how great you are, you're even greater through his eyes. So he's like, oh my gosh, you're the best in the world, we're meant to be together, and he actually kind of means it. He does. He's not trying to trick you. He means it. He sees you through the vision of everything he ever wanted. Wow. But then there comes a day in the course of this whole relationship. There comes a day early on, usually, when all of a sudden, wow, he feels like a sigh of relief, like a kind of a unity experience within himself. He's kicked back, he's euphoric, he's, wow, we're one now, we're married, or this, and he's unconscious, or we're engaged, or she said, I love you, or we're moving in together, or we've moved in, or one case was he bought $1 billion life insurance policy, and she won't leave me now because I'm older than her. It was an older couple, and he bought this so she wouldn't leave. And that was, she called me, she said, 5 years ago, this whole relationship, we've been married 10 years, 5 years ago he completely switched. And I said, what happened? And she said, nothing. Well, wait a minute. Something made him feel really secure. There must have been something. Oh, he took out this $1 million life insurance policy.
Wow.
Oh, that's when his unconscious, if it could speak, said, this body won't leave me now. It's a safe harbor for the rest of me. And once that rest of him gets poured into you like you were this beautiful hologram, and then you're the rest of him. He's kicked back, he's complete, and you know what he meant. You know what he's talking about. You shouldn't have to ask a question. You shouldn't ask anything. You should shut up. You should be silent.
Right.
That's the way he will be, because you're real woman, and he doesn't want real woman to show up in your body and eject him, but he doesn't know about it. All he knows is he feels attacked all the time, and he's just getting fed up with it. Yeah. And all you're doing is saying, hi, honey, did you see if the mail came?
Exactly. How was your day? What?
How was your day? What? Why ask me about my day? You don't really care about my day. Oh, really?
Right. Oh, my goodness.
It's so insane.
It is. Wow.
It's so insane. It's really insane, isn't it?
Yeah. It is. And so what do you,
people, they can try to wake him up by having some witnesses and do this little intervention. The very best way to do it is to call these, because the agreement is very, very long in the book. So I can show them how to have this really powerful modified way.
Okay.
And if they wake him up, all they've done is let him see that some of the things he said are irrational, and she's not happy with them.
Mm-hmm.
However, that doesn't change them, because they have to integrate the whole lost self. They
Mm-hmm.
have to integrate their warm side, their receptive side. They have to integrate their intuition and their emotions, and knowing they have an emotional function and a feeling function, and they have to do all this work. So then they have to find out about the whole program for me, which includes
Mm-hmm.
a lot of reading and a lot of trauma therapy for their childhood, and just a lot of work, and generally being separated
Mm-hmm.
from the partner, and posting on the Men Ending Verbal Abuse and Control site, and journaling there later on every day, and listening to the Thursday night talks, and going every week, once or twice a week, to their trauma therapist.
Mm-hmm.
And they have one heck of a lot of work to do, because really half of them is missing most of the time, And they, by the way, they've developed this really great persona for the world.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, they have a perfected persona. That persona is like Mr. Nice Guy, Mr. Charming, Mr. Charismatic, and no wonder, for the partner, it's like, nobody could believe what she's going through.
Exactly.
Nobody could believe what she's going through.
Impossible.
Nobody does. Yeah, they just don't know. They don't believe it. So that's why, like the video, that could be a cool thing, just to have something to validate her own mind, that she's not going crazy.
Right.
And then and so for her, what I think most is she just has to know and should read everything about this issue, all my books, because each one gives you a part of the picture, and to really distance herself, to never ask him a question again. If he's a rager all the time, to listen to an iPod or something with headset, and listen to symphony, classical music, never ask him a question, and just leave a note on the table. I'll be back, and invite some meetup groups to meet at your house, find some fun friends, have parties, and don't invite him. Just ignore him, because if you can't leave him right away, if you can't file for divorce, and he won't acknowledge anything with the agreement, the intervention thing, and he won't do anything about it, then, you could be with a real sociopath. And occasionally I run across one, and that's very scary, because they have, one of the things they do is they do this gaslighting thing, and that's where they like take something away, and that you always had sitting on the counter, and you go to reach for it, it's not there, and they say it's never been there. Are you kidding? I don't remember seeing a silver platter. What are you talking about? We never had a silver platter.
Right.
Well, I know there always was there. So the sociopath enjoys the win, and the win could be whatever he's chosen. And for some, it's to, just make his wife feel crazy. That's a win. For some, it could be falsifying records as having degrees and taking over on some business venture. It could be all kinds of wins. But whatever the win is, for the one who does it in this way with verbal abuse and all, they really will just add that to the mix and try to make the person feel crazy. Another thing they do is they tell a lot of children, their children often, they'll say, your mother's crazy, she doesn't know what she's talking about, she's insane, and all that stuff. And so I think it's important to know that if you suspect anything's wrong in your marriage, and you have children, then that you say to your children, especially if you're going to be separating or anything like that, listen, I'm never going to mention your father to you if you have your own relationship with your father. If I say, oh, your dad, blah, blah, you say, I don't want to talk about it. And the same thing, if your dad says, well, your mom, blah, blah, you say, I don't want to talk about it, because you're never supposed to be in the middle between us.
Right.
Ever, ever, ever. Never in the middle. And just keep remembering that. Okay, so then if they do get a divorce, the kids have learned that, and they just don't let that happen where they're listening to their father. And the kids, if the kids are like 18, 22, 25, there's no custody battles or anything like that, then the children should say they're going to go to they know that their mother wants them for Christmas, and their father does too, because he got married again. Mm-hmm. One just recently got married within 2 months of leaving the relationship woman that I was talking to. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's been out 2 months and he's already married again. Wow. And he told her daughter, you know what? I don't like I'm not in love with her or anything. She's just convenient. That's his new person. Wow. Yeah, that's real sociopathic stuff, isn't it? Really... Anyway, it sounds pretty awful. It's pretty awful. But kids, but as a matter of fact, if a couple's divorced, it isn't necessary for either person to know if the other person's married or not married or got married again or got divorced and married or anything about them, because you don't have a relationship with them anymore. Exactly. And the kids, if they're going to have a holiday with you, they can say, well, I'll be busy Christmas Eve, but I'll see you Christmas Day, or vice versa. They don't have to even tell you if they ever see them. You don't have to know anything about them. You separate out when you've been traumatized by somebody in this way, in this mind-boggling way. It's just fine not to have any contact with them at all. Once it's divorce and things are settled out, that's it. Yeah, no contact. Doesn't have to be, because it's just not, the thing. It's just not going to help you. It's not going to help the kids to be caught in the middle. Once in a while, I will hear of some adult child who is completely, in one, I think, emotionally incested by the father, not physically, but emotionally incested, who father can walk on water, and everything father says, is believed by this young woman who's about 30, and she just doesn't get it. Thinks, oh, mother really is crazy. Yeah. Yeah. Not so good. Not so good. So I just think, being careful with your kids and making sure that you can say, this is not okay when they say something, and you could say to say you have a husband and you have a 7 and 9-year-old kids or something, and the father says something like, you're never going to amount to anything. Look, you missed one of these on this test, or something. You can say, hey, it's not okay to tell him he'll never amount to anything. That's not okay. You can say that. You don't have to say your father's blah, 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 but you can't say that's not okay. We don't put people down here, or we don't call people names here. So that's a way to kind of address it in a general way without alienating the child totally from the father. That's good. Because we don't call names here. We don't put people down here. Yeah. So there. Yeah.
I like that. So, very helpful.
Yeah.
Have you seen any of the gaslighting with children? Any of the?
No, I actually don't think so. I think maybe people play games maybe where they hide it. Oh, here it is, but not really to say, no, you're crazy. We never had that storybook. I don't think I've seen that with children. That would be so horrible, messing with their minds. That is like a gaslighting where they say, we never had that conversation. It never occurred. And women have actually really thought that their spouse had a multiple personality and really didn't know. He just had that conversation like 20 minutes ago. Yeah. And it's just, that's what, after a while, you really want to maybe have a video or something,
Exactly.
Because it's so mind-boggling and so crazy.
And for a child, that's really disturbing. If you have a child who has an excellent memory, and they are ideal.
Oh, and they remember.
Person. And they're really looking forward to something. They're talking about it left and right. And then you're like, okay, let me check on that.
Oh, my gosh. Somebody's got to just shake him, or, I mean, really, just say, if you intend to destroy your child's mind by saying what they remember didn't happen, you may have karma with that for millions of generations, millions of lifetimes. something that'll get through to him,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just something to get through. How can you, or just golly, how can you attempt to destroy your child's mind?
Yeah.
What kind of evil is that? What kind of evil is that? To say, yes, you get this, and then, no, I never said it. That is just pure evil. Yeah, it really is. It's horrible. And I think somebody of real import has to tell him that.
Yeah.
Really, 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 really important person.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very, very validating. I totally agree. And it's just so great to hear you say it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, now we have a name, verbally abusive relationship, for all this crazy making stuff that happens. And before that, it just, people would just feel like they were going crazy.
Right.
And they do, and very depressed and all that. And it's really important for this to be understood all over. And the defining of people, when you get down to it, is just like, what's wrong with the world is some people are defining other people, as not worthy or not okay or to be annihilated or, whatever. And, that whole thing about how they expect you as a projection of them to think what they think and know what they want and believe what they believe. Well, that's what the terrorists are doing. They're saying, if you don't believe what we believe, if you don't adopt our religion, our belief system, and then if you don't think what we think and want what we want, we're going to kill you, because they're just disconnected, just very, very disconnected people. They're just so messed up. And they don't see themselves as cowards, unable to stand on their own 2 feet. They've got to stand in your space and tell you what you should think and know what you think and know whether you're worthy or not. I mean, they're pretending to be God, and they're pretending to be you and these other people, the people that they're attacking. They are really, really cowards, and they kill thousands of people. And they're just such cowards, and they really have to learn. We have to teach people it's a very cowardly behavior to be over there within someone telling you what to think. You're not them. You don't know. Yeah. Okay.
It's the ultimate.
Yeah.
Well, Patricia, this has been amazing. I just have 2 quick questions for you. So, you mentioned all your books, which is great. Your website it's verbalabuse.com.
Right.
Okay. And I'll have this in the show notes on theaudaciouslife.com, which I will direct
wonderful.
We're launching everything very, very soon. So it'll be up. You'll have your own page with all this information. But one thing you mentioned that I didn't quite catch was you mentioned when men, there might be some men listening who recognize some of this within themselves, so they can go to your website. But you also mentioned another website for men, I believe. And what's that called?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that one. If that's just 1/6 of the program that I have. That is, it's right on my site. It's called Men Ending Verbal Abuse and Control.
Okay.
There's a site for men on the home page. MEVAC, acronym is MEVAC. But they're not going to change just going to that site. They have no clue. Yeah. But that is just one of the things that is great for them to explore when they really should just have that 1 hour. See, here's the thing. 1 hour with the partner, 1 hour with him. That's it. That's all they really, basically, almost anybody needs, because they know exactly what's wrong with him, what he's doing, how to wake him up, and he knows what to do, because I give him the whole program on his hour, and then he has to check back with me, and she can call me anytime, and it's just kind of open. Yeah.
So how many men? So there are men who actually agree to do this? Like they're aware enough and accepting enough to actually have a conversation?
When she says, "Hey, sweetheart, if we're gonna," when she says, "Sweetheart, if we're gonna have any kind of a relationship at all, I'm asking that you not tell me what I am and think and feel, because, honey, guess what? You're not me. You're not a woman, and you don't live within me. And guess what? You're not God. So if you're not me and you're not God, I want you to know you absolutely terrify me when you pretend to be me or God." And when you do that, it's so toxic and so horrible that I won't be able to stay with you if you can't do some work. And so I want you to agree that you will refrain from telling me what I am and think and feel and want and need and know. And here are some examples. I've heard you say, "You are, you think," blah, blah, and you yell out each one in front of 3 or 4 people or come over for cake, and they know that you're going to read something to them.
Those poor people.
That's your intervention. They
Right.
come over and you say, you go to a coffee shop or you go ask off-duty cops, you ask lawyers, whoever you want. They come and they sit there, and then, they observe, and you say, oh, do you guys mind? And they know what you're going to do. I have to read something to my husband because you said, hi, honey, come on in. These are some friends of mine. Here's some cake. And we're just having a little dessert time. And then, oh, I wanted to read something to you. They said, go ahead. You pull it out. You don't mind? No, we don't mind. And then you just read it. And you read those 400, some have 400, some have 200 of abusive sentences. If you go to the appendix, you'll find 150 guaranteed.
Yeah.
And, so then they read that whole to me, and what I think. I've heard you say, and not only that, sweetheart, you've told me how I feel as if you lived in my body. Yuck, I feel like vomiting when you pretend to be me, a woman. I've heard you say, you don't care. You're not tired, So you shout him out. And then at the end, I will not indulge in any of the above, and you sign it, and he signs it. And if he doesn't, well, then one woman got a divorce filed a day or two before she did this, and then she just served him with his papers, and he decided he'd do it. She said, well, I'll hold off on the divorce. Okay, so see, it's these they need this huge impact. Because they're in their little ivory tower type thing. They're so superior. They're so smart. They think they're so great. They just, they just need a big wake-up call.
Right.
A big wake-up call. Yeah, and remind women, if you're ever hit or you're ever pointed a knife or gun at you or somebody tries to strangle you, or anybody pushes you, or anybody knocks you down, or anybody grabs your arm and leaves a mark because they're keeping you from escaping, you call 911 and you get a restraining order and get them out of your house. They need to know that they might be living out there in some room somewhere because they're not going to be in your house.
Right.
Yeah, not going to be. Just not.
That's great.
Oh, my God. Yeah. It's
Really?
just an amazing. Oh, I know one. Let's see, I know what. One of the things that I wanted to tell you is I got a letter today from a guy who's been through my program and has spent a good year and a half in intensive work. And, okay. And he told me about a movie called Big Eyes, and it's, he said the abuse is the underlying theme of the movie, and the movie is almost a textbook, in quotes, kind of case, with a vulnerable woman, early charm, a pressure to commit, a gradual taking over of her skills, her sinking into despair over ever straightening things out, guilt that she was ever a part of the situation, and ultimately a pathological certainty of the husband that it truly was he that created all the art, even until and beyond being proved otherwise in a court of law. He just wouldn't see it. Now, this is from a man who actually didn't really see it himself,
Wow.
Now he can write about seeing how it is, see?
The pattern,
Yeah.
Wow, that's
the
pretty
pattern.
phenomenal. And what's your success rate for people you treat? I mean, is that pretty
see, I just give them the program, and they're on their own. So I don't really know what percentages. The guys on MEVAC, they would know better. And for sure, if there's anybody there that you can talk to.
Okay,
and,
that's a great idea.
Yeah, so, and this is helping. To me, it's like giving women their minds back because they feel like they're losing their mind almost. More conscious and careful and thoughtful and intelligent you are, the more it makes you crazy because
exactly. Because you're a thinker and a feeler, right?
Because you're a thinker and a feeler, exactly. And really, really getting it's just nothing. It's like a drive-by shooting. It has nothing to do with you. It's just aimed at you, and it could kill you.
Wow,
but
that's a good metaphor.
On the other hand, it's just garbage coming out of his mouth, junk. Yeah. Wow. So it's very insidious and horrible in units.
Wow, I bet.
Can you believe?
The last question I was going to ask you was, what do you think, given the number of interviews you've had, people you've spoken to, all the stuff that's in the media, the people on your forums and your Facebook, all that. What would you guess? How prevalent is this? Would you say what percentage of marriages are?
Yeah, percentage. Okay, there was a book a guy wrote sometime after the first book came out, but he did mention men. Okay, this doctor wrote it. I think it was called Refusing to be a Man or something. It was Dr. Daniel somebody. If I find it, I'll let you know, or you ask me maybe in a month from now if I found it. If I remember what I'm doing, because I've got millions of little things to do. But anyway, the thing is, he didn't quote a university study. He quoted a man who works with angry men, who works on anger, those group things, the men's group things. And he said that it was either 65 or 75% of men attempt to control their partners with verbal abuse.
Jeez, that's wow.
Yeah. So I try to be very conservative, and I say at least half of the men out there, because remember, just a couple generations ago, they defined women as unable to vote, and they defined women as not competent to own property, and they were psychologically raping these women all over the whole United States. All the men in the United States were defining them, and they defined them as, in fact, this doctor told me that his first class in medical school, he's 93 years old, and he said his first class had 25 women, and it was the first time they even let them in.
Wow. Yeah.
So it's not that far back when you think that his mother lived to 103 or 5, and he rides a stationary bike an hour every day. So he's going to outlive all of us, I think.
Sounds great.
Yeah. So, but to think in his memory and in his, in the family culture, people would have to kind of know this and stuff. It's not that hard to think that half of them define their partners.
Right.
Because, and some very severely, some just kind of macho-y, oh yeah, there's my wife, she's in the kitchen where she belongs,
Exactly.
And they laugh because they have to bond together against women so they can feel connected to something, because they don't feel connected to anything inside because they've lost their inside because their father raised them to lose their feelings and sensations and intuitions. My most important book, Controlling People, you've got to read it.
Okay.
Just for depth,
Gotcha. Yeah, absolutely.
Got to read it.
On your website, do you have your books listed in order that they should be read for the average person?
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. All the women should read it. It says first book, second book, third book, fourth book, fifth book. And when you click on it, then you get more, and you get the cover, and you click on the cover, it says click here, and you get the book on Amazon.
So quite a few resources were mentioned during this show, and I just want to recap the most important one, which is about safety planning. So if you are thinking about leaving or you're just feeling unsafe, you should have a safety plan in place, and you can find lots of information about this at the National Domestic Violence Awareness site, and that is thehotline.org. thehotline.org. And if you go to thehotline.org/help or look for the help link on the page, scroll down and you'll actually see safety planning right there. You could also Google all those words, of course, and find the same resources. So why am I mentioning this instead of just having you go to the show notes page? Because I'm trying my best, but the audaciouslife.com website is not fully up and running. I expect it to be up in the next week or two, so bear with me if you're listening to this early on and the podcast has just launched. So I will be speaking some of these URLs, but if you're in iTunes, you can click on the more info, and the links are embedded there as well. And the website for Patricia Evans is verbalabuse.com. verbalabuse.com, and that's where the forum is that we mentioned during the show. And so that's a great place to go to try to find some like-minded women who can support you through your journey, and it's incredibly validating, so I can't recommend it enough. verbalabuse.com. Please, again, as always, forward this podcast on to anyone you know who might be suffering from emotional, verbal abuse or controlling situations. And really, our job is to hopefully enlighten, educate, and inspire women to stand up for themselves and to realize that they are worthy of more than their situation may make them feel. And that's what this podcast is all about, just helping women break free from the situations that they're in and really just improve their sense of well-being and their sense of being in the world, because life's way too short to be walking on eggshells and living in fear on a daily basis. If you have time, if you could go to iTunes and give us a review and a rating for our podcast, that would help us stay afloat and get the word out and raise awareness on this topic and help other women. So we'd appreciate that. And please do tune in again. Thank you so much for listening. Have a great day.